Hey there, I'm Crystal Gornto, the founder of HeartStories, and I am here with Dr. Jay Woody for another episode of Ask the Expert. Jay is the Chief Medical Officer and founder of Legacy ER with 6 locations here across the DFW Metroplex, and he is our expert on all things healthcare right now. So welcome, Jay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course, always so good to have you. Always so helpful and informative. I was just thinking that it's great to have you at our fingertips to be able to kind of pull all of the pertinent healthcare hot topics all into one conversation, so we don't have to go searching for hopefully valid sites on the internet for our news and information.
Absolutely. That can be a scary search.
It is. It's crazy what you
I don't recommend it.
I know. Okay, so let's talk. COVID is still here. It's still here. It hasn't gone away yet. So tell us what we need to know about COVID still being here and being safe.
Absolutely. So, on a positive note, there has been some movement in the right direction. And so that is good. But I think the most important thing is that we don't let our guard down and continue to be vigilant and not sort of put the blinders on because we see that the numbers have turned the corner, because they could go the other direction. And so, still recommending to do all the things that we know are what needs to happen to keep us and our family and our community safe, keep people out of the hospital. I know you, for example, had a very personal encounter with COVID, and sort of how awful that can be. And so definitely would not, want that for anyone. So just continue to be vigilant. If you've been exposed or you're having symptoms, get testing done. We at Legacy ER, we continue to offer, the rapid test. We also have the PCR test, and then of course antibody testing as well. So just all I can say is, COVID is still here. I would love for it to go away so I could make some summer plans. Currently, right. Everything's on hold. So, selfishly, I want COVID to stop.
Right. So tell me, right? I obviously selfishly want it to stop as well. You talked about the different testing types. One of the things that worked great for my family when we got it is we went to Legacy ER, we got the antigen test, and then we, in the same visit, because one of us was positive, we got the
PCR.
But I forget why we did that, but we did go ahead and get the antigen and the PCR at the same time. So by the time, like, even if the antigen came back negative, that the PCR, which actually happened for us, the antigen came back negative, but then the PCR was already on the way and it came back positive. So it helped, right, at least in our situation, have a better idea of when we actually got it, rather than waiting 4 or 5 days to go back.
Right. PCR. That's right. So that was a good move by the physician who took care of you, because
you recommended. It was a woman. She was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Glad doing good work. We have great people. So the benefit of the antigen test, it's rapid, immediately, within 15 minutes.
Right.
It is slightly less sensitive, very slightly, but it is slightly less sensitive than the PCR test. And so if we're highly suspicious that someone has COVID, but their antigen test is negative, then the next test to do would be the PCR test, so that it's kind of the gold standard. It's sort of like if you've gone to the pediatrician and they do a rapid strep test and it's negative, then they send the culture, because the rapid strep test can miss some things. It's an okay test, but it's not the gold standard. So that's the same analogy as the rapid antigen test versus the PCR. Again, the antigen test is very good, but if you're too early, it could miss you. And so that it's sort of a fail safe to do that as a backup.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay. It's the whole testing is crazy. There's everywhere you go, there's a stand along there with 9 million cars. It's crazy. So it's so easy to come into Legacy ER, just get both tests done if needed and be done with it. So
that's right. And I think that's the advantage of one of the advantages at Legacy ER, we do have all the testing options available. Therefore, you have a physician who sort of evaluates your situation and says, hey, here's what you need. Because like you said, it is very confusing. And you may think, oh, well, I need an antibody test, but you need an antigen test or a PCR test. So I think that's the advantage of having all the tests available at one, one facility, and then having someone help you navigate what test do I need.
Yes, yeah, which is so interesting. I want to talk about the antibody test because my husband, my kids and I have had COVID, and even during that time, I mean, I was hacking up a lung, like it was not pretty around here. And he has still never tested positive, and has so he went during that time to Legacy ER and did the antigen and the PCR test, and he went ahead and did the antibody test, and it came back negative. And I know he probably should go back later now, but talk to us about that.
Sure. So my recommendation is you need to wait 3 weeks after sort of your exposure or potential having COVID. It takes about that long for the antibodies to appear and be in a form that the test can detect them. So, for example, I recently had a friend who's one of their family members tested positive. The rest of the family members never had any symptoms whatsoever. The one who was positive was actually pretty sick, struggled with it. And, risk of being in the same home with someone who's positive put you at even greater risk than just sort of the community at large.
Right.
He checked in with me. I said, wait 3 weeks and go get an antibody test. He did that and his test was positive. So I
Wow.
think the value of the antibody test, it helps you navigate if you've had it or not. And again, like I know we've talked in previous encounters, just because you have the antibody, you really shouldn't sort of let your guard down. But I
Right.
do think it is helpful for you to know, because it can help you sort of make some decisions that might involve sort of family members or work or things like that. So I think there is a value to the antibody test, knowing if you're if it's positive, it's helpful. If it's negative, it doesn't really help you that much.
Right. So if it's that's it, just while you were talking about that, it made me wonder at school, once the kids, at least at our school, I don't know all the school rules, but once our kids have had a positive test and done their quarantine, they can go back, and it actually eliminates them from being contact traced, I think, for 3 months.
That
I could be
that
wrong.
sounds right.
Okay.
That sounds right. And I'm basing that on the current CDC recommendations, which just came out regarding vaccinated people.
Okay.
And essentially, if you've had both your vaccines and you're at least 10 days out from that second vaccine, you have an exposure, you do not have to quarantine.
Perfect. Okay. So that's, yeah. So that would be the same. Is it a vaccine? Okay. So that's another question. Then is the vaccine considered the same level of antibodies of actually having had COVID?
Well, that's a little bit of a loaded question, because it depends on the level of illness that you had,
Oh,
how many antibodies you have. So those that had very, very mild disease, their antibodies are going away more rapidly than those that became sort of very ill with the disease. So the essentially, the sicker you are, the better immunity you get. Now, the advantage of the vaccine, based on just the literature that I've read about them from the manufacturers, is that depending on if you're using the Pfizer or the Moderna, I mean, they're both about 95% effective, which means 95% of the time, if you have a direct exposure, you will not get sick. So it is actually far superior to the antibodies that you generated just from, say, getting sick yourself. And
mm,
that's why there is still the recommendation that even though you have had COVID, that you still get vaccinated, because that gets you over that 95% line, which is extremely effective. And so recommendation currently is anyone who's had COVID to wait 3 months and then still get vaccinated.
okay. So what did you're saying that the 95% is higher than if you had COVID and have your own antibodies? Is there a percentage for, and I know you said it's a loaded question, but like if you had it
It
really bad, what are they
right.
thinking?
It goes from probably, 0 up to 95%. And unfortunately it would be very dependent on the person and sort of the illness, but sort of tangentially, if you had very mild disease, then you probably are not well protected from COVID. If you had severe disease, then you actually are probably very well protected. But that's sort of nuance. So it would be hard to say like, well, I sort of had it really bad, and so I'm good, versus, well, I sort of had it bad, so I'm only good for a month and a half. And so unfortunately, it's not clear enough for people to make decisions based on that, which is why it's recommended you still get a vaccine even if you've had the disease.
Got it. But someone, for instance, like your friend who tested positive for the antibodies but didn't appear to have symptoms, you're saying that tangentially that he has fewer or less defense
Yeah,
against.
so he likely would he could be someone where you heard about people getting reinfected. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's likely that he has a very little to no immunization for it, and so he he wouldn't want to. None of us would want to do anything risky, but for sure he is in the range of essentially being non-vaccinated almost.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting. I didn't realize there was. I mean, I guess it makes sense. The sicker you are, the more antibodies your body has to produce.
Absolutely.
But it hadn't thought about that. There's one of my close friends never knew she had it, but went on a trip out of the country and had to get the antibody test, and she had them, or got maybe she had to get a test and she decided to get the antibodies. She had the antibodies and didn't realize that she
Right.
had COVID. So
And so that's good. There is some partial immunity with that. It's just not at that 95. And also that 95% is controlled. Like if you have the vaccine, like we know you have that. If you
right,
just have the disease, we don't really know what you have.
right, true. Okay, so interesting. So tell me this. One of the things, again, this is just completely anecdotal from my circle of people, but I'm A positive and had it pretty bad, not terrible, but I got it. And my husband, my children and I all got it. My husband, who lives with us, did not get it. My mom, who lived with my dad, who passed away, and
Mhm.
drove him in the car multiple times with, very sick, is did not get it. And all the folks that I know that haven't gotten it or haven't at least had symptoms and been sick are O positive. And I'm A positive and have, my dad was A positive. It's just interesting. And I've read a little bit that there seems to be some evidence pointing that your blood type can make a difference. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, definitely have read the same thing about what type blood you are, and then your rhesus, which is the negative or positive value, and
Mhm.
the negatives actually seem to have an advantage, and then to your point, the O's seem to fare better than the ABs. So I think that the jury is still out on that, but there definitely are some trends that would say that this is a thing, and I suspect that this has always been a thing with other diseases such as influenza and things like that. Nobody's ever looked at it, and I also have a suspicion that people are going to start tracking this with all types of diseases, because there's no doubt that genetically there's some of us are predisposition to sort of fare better or worse with different processes, just because that's just how genetics work. And so there's no doubt that will start following this for things such as influenza and other illnesses that are communicable. And I bet you 10 years from now, if I could predict the future, which I'm very horrible at doing that, but if I could, right, that people will go, oh, you came in with influenza type H1N1 and you are A positive, so you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Something along the lines like that,
Or you're
or
not like,
you're
oh,
not.
you're impossible.
We
Get you to the hospital.
Exactly. Or we need to be super aggressive with you and put you on all these medicines that have sort of bad side effects, but we know you're going to do poorly if we don't.
Mhm.
Versus, hey, you know what, you're O negative, so let's not be super aggressive, because it has been shown that those people fare very well with us. So I think to
Yeah,
your
very
point,
helpful.
yeah. So it will be helpful in the future. Not, unfortunately, not today.
Right. Yeah. Well, not at all today, but well, it's very interesting. So, your best advice amid the lingering COVID going into the spring, what's your best advice for us?
Yeah, so I think just stay vigilant. Don't let your guard down. I think it's okay, to do things outdoors. Keep up your social distancing. You don't have to shut down your life. You can still do some things, but just don't put your blinders on and pretend that COVID is gone. Because I think the best thing we could do, sort of for our community, is just get rid of COVID so we can open up, schools, open up businesses, make everyone sort of get some form of normalcy back to life. I think if you have symptoms or you've been exposed, come to like CR, wherever, get tested. I think it might be useful for those that potentially were exposed after 3 weeks to get an antibody test. Again, we're happy to do those. I know there's lots of, different opportunities out there, but we are still open. We're still taking care of people. And, we have all the testing and we've got all the equipment to keep everybody safe if they're not vaccinated or haven't had COVID. So I think that would sort of be my, closing to this is, let's just continue to be vigilant.
Yes. And I want to add to your closing. Sorry, we're closing just a minute. That you guys have a great process. I mean, I've been there several times through this with the whole COVID testing, needing to go in and get retested or whatever. And you have a great, like, very low contact process, at least at the Frisco location. I assume that that's across all of your 6 locations, that
Absolutely.
the paperwork figured out where we're answering all the questions in advance and just handing it off. And it's very, very minimal contact with others in general, even your team. Like, it's like the person who's your point of care for that person, and then the doctor, and then we leave. And there's not a lot of passing of pens or needing to shuffle papers or it's all very locked down, and you've got to figure it out and get it all moving through. So that was
Thank you. Yeah, no, we've continued to, and it's been a learning process during this pandemic, but we continue to, our goal is to keep our patients safe and keep the facility clean and do our part to, continue to take care of patients, but also not put them at any kind of risk.
Yeah, no, you've just done a great job. And I guess that's what I meant, is you can tell that you've taken what you've learned over all of these months and implemented different processes. It's different than when we first went in, and it's better. It's great.
It's been a process for sure.
Sure, I can only imagine. Well, thank you. Thank you for sticking with it and staying open and continuing to care for everyone. I know just for my personal family, it's just been huge on multiple different fronts. So I really appreciate it. And
well, thank you, Crystal. That's I know it's been a rough go, but I'm glad we were able to support you.
So much so, yes. Thank you. So if anyone needs any emergency care, slip and falls, anything going on right now, or COVID testing, any type of COVID testing, it's legacyER.com. 6 locations throughout the Metroplex. Thank you. And everybody ask for Dr. Woody. Just kidding.
That's right. I'll be at all places at all times, 24/7.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Talk to you soon.